The cold Alaskan air cut into my lungs as we trudged deeper into the forest, Mason leading the way with a strangely purposeful stride. The wilderness here wasn't forgiving. Towering spruce trees stretched endlessly toward the sky, their shadows swallowing every trace of daylight. The path beneath our boots was little more than dirt and roots, damp from the last night's frost. I had walked trails like this before, back when Sarah was alive, back when Mason was just a boy marveling at every footprint in the soil. But something about this journey felt different. It felt staged, planned. "Dad, this is far enough," Mason said abruptly, his voice sharp in the still air. I frowned, glancing around at the desolate clearing he had chosen. There was no campsite here, no shelter, no sign of preparation, just endless wilderness. "Mason, we're 30 miles from the nearest road," I replied, my voice even but tinged with unease. "Why stop here? We should find a proper spot before nightfall." He turned then, and for the first time, I noticed the hardness in his expression. His jaw was set, eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite name, resentment, maybe even hatred. He let the straps of his pack fall to the ground and straightened his shoulders like a man about to deliver a final verdict. "Because this is where we part ways," he said coldly. I stared at him, not fully processing the words. "Part ways? What are you talking about?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't a father-son trip. This is goodbye." His lips curled into a cruel half-smile. "Go meet the Grizzly." The words slammed into me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My own son, the boy I had raised, the child I had carried on my shoulders at Little League games, was standing before me as a stranger. "Mason," my voice cracked. "You're leaving me here, without food?" Then, like a switch flipping inside me, training took over. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. Not here. Not now. I forced myself to breathe deeply, scanning my surroundings with sharp eyes. The forest wasn't just empty, it was alive, filled with predators, obstacles, and merciless cold. I patted my pockets, a folding knife, my wallet, keys, that was all. No GPS, no food rations, no rifle, no shelter equipment. Mason had taken everything. The betrayal cut deeper than the danger itself. I had given him everything, years of sacrifice, endless support, second chances he never earned. And this was the repayment, abandonment in bear country. But I was not ready to die. Not like this. Not by his hand. The silence pressed in, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. My pulse steadied. I wasn't helpless. I had survived worse. And if Mason thought this was the end of me, he was gravely mistaken. "Meet the Grizzly," he had said. No comma, I thought grimly. Mason hadn't left me to the Grizzly. He had awakened something else entirely. Long before the Alaskan wilderness became my battleground for survival. The real war had already been brewing within the walls of my own home. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet, gradual, the kind of erosion you don't notice until the foundation finally gives way. I still remember that evening in Seattle, the rain tapping against the windows, the familiar chill of the Pacific Northwest seeping into the house. I had been at my desk, invoices spread out before me, when Mason stormed inside. His hoodie was damp from drizzle, his sneakers squeaking across the hardwood floors. But it wasn't the sound that made me pause, it was the look in his eyes. Hard, demanding, unyielding. "Dad, I need $5,000. Tonight." The words landed heavy, almost violent. Not a request, a demand. I froze, pen still in hand. "What?" I said. "I need Without another word, Mason spun toward the door. The slam echoed through the house like a gunshot, rattling the family photo of Sarah on the mantel. Her smiling face trembled behind the glass, as though even she was shaking her head in disbelief. The silence that followed pressed down on me until my ears rang. I just stood there frozen, my pen still gripped tightly, staring at that photo. Sarah's face, the same face that had kept me going through the darkest years, looked back at me with a quiet accusation. "You failed him. You failed us." The next morning, I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself that Mason had spoken out of frustration. But as I reached to straighten the photo frame, memories came flooding back. Sarah's funeral, Mason's small hand gripping mine in his too big suit, the crushing weight of debt from her medical bills, the mortgage hanging by a thread, and my promise, my dying wife's final wish, that I would take care of our son. I had clung to that promise like a lifeline. I poured everything I had into Mason. His private school tuition, $40,000 a year, his university education, complete with dorm life he insisted on. The brand new Honda Civic I gave him for graduation, $18,000 in cash because he refused anything used. Every page of our photo albums told the same story. Me sacrificing, him receiving. While other kids worked summer jobs, Mason played video games. While other kids learned responsibility, Mason learned entitlement. And I had convinced myself it was love, that every dollar was proof I was doing right by him. But the truth was darker. Every bailout, every handout, every crisis I solved with my checkbook had carved away at his character. I hadn't been building him up. I had been hollowing him out. By Thursday, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I sat in Sarah's old chair, the one I'd never had the heart to move, and let private school tuition at $40,000 a year because public school wasn't good enough for Sarah's son. University expenses, dorm fees, books, meals, all paid in full because Mason insisted independence meant living on campus, not at home. The Honda Civic, brand new, $18,000 in cash, handed over like a rite of passage because he refused to drive anything used. Every demand was another chance for me to prove that I was living up to my promise. Every check I wrote was another bandage slapped over the gaping wound of my guilt. Guilt that Sarah hadn't been there to see him grow. Guilt that I was trying to raise him alone. Guilt that maybe love wasn't enough, so I replaced it with money. But staring at those photos, the truth cut through the lies I had been telling myself for 2 decades. I hadn't been giving Mason opportunities. I had been shielding him from reality. While other teenagers flipped burgers, bagged groceries, and learned the value of sweat-earned money, Mason had spent summers glued to his video games, never once worrying about how bills were paid. I told myself it was fine. That he deserved joy after all the loss, that I was protecting him from hardship. But hardship is what shapes a man, and I had robbed him of it. I traced the edges of a picture from his 16th birthday. He was smiling, but even then, there was something missing in his eyes. A hunger, yes, but not for life. For more, always more. Bigger gifts, larger allowances, grander gestures. Each time I gave in. Each time I thought it would be enough to fill the hole left by his mother's death. Instead, all I did was dig that hole deeper. By the time he was in college, it wasn't about gratitude anymore. It was expectation. If I didn't meet his demands, he'd grow sullen, resentful, bitter. And every time I caved, telling myself I was avoiding conflict, telling myself it was low. The words echoed in the empty house. And for the first time, I feared what Mason might become, not someday, but already. Sunday morning came quiet and gray. I sat at my desk, pen poised over a stack of legal papers I hadn't yet had the courage to sign. The blank spaces stared back at me like questions I wasn't ready to answer. They weren't just contracts, they were contingencies, defenses against possibilities I couldn't bear to imagine. Possibilities that now, after Mason's outburst, seemed less like nightmares and more like inevitabilities. The phone rang. Once, twice. I hesitated, hand hovering before I finally answered. "Hello, son." "Dad, hey, how are you doing?" His voice was strangely bright, too cheerful, too eager. It set my teeth on edge immediately. Mason had never been good at masking his emotions, anger, resentment, greed. They all bled through his words like cracks in cheap glass. But this sounded rehearsed. "I'm fine," I said slowly. "This is unexpected. After our conversation last week." "Yeah, about that." His tone softened, dropping into an imitation of contrition. "Look, I've been thinking. I was way out of line, and I want to make it right." I didn't answer. Years of Navy training had taught me the value of silence. Sometimes silence forced the truth out quicker than any interrogation. "Actually," Mason continued, his words tumbling too fast, "I have a proposal. Something that could fix everything between us." A chill ran down my spine. His proposals always involved money. But this time, it was something different. "Let's go camping together," he said. "In Alaska. Denali National Park. Just you and me. Like when I was a kid, remember?" The suggestion hit me like a jolt. Camping? Mason hadn't shown the slightest interest in the outdoors since high school. He hated dirt under his nails, hated being away from Wi-Fi, hated discomfort of any kind. "Really? That's fantastic." His excitement spiked too high, too sudden, like a man whose gamble had just paid off. "I'll text you the flight details. Meet me at SeaTac. This is going to be amazing, Dad. You'll see." The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly, my hand trembling slightly. Outside, Seattle's drizzle traced cold rivers down the window pane. I looked back at the documents on my desk, then at the pen still in my grip. Hope and preparation sat side by side, each one feeling like a betrayal of the other. 3 days later, I folded those papers carefully and slipped them into the inner pocket of my travel bag. They felt heavier than they should have, weighted with possibilities I had never wanted to face. At SeaTac, Mason was already waiting at the gate. He bounced on his heels like an overeager teenager, though his smile stretched too wide to be genuine. His backpack looked brand new, the tags still dangling from the zippers. "Dad, perfect timing. They just called for boarding." "You seem excited," I said, studying him. "Why wouldn't I be? Father-son adventure in the last frontier." But his eyes betrayed him. A twitch in the corner, a calculation hiding behind the mask of enthusiasm. As we stepped onto the plane, I felt the weight of both realities pressing down. Maybe this was reconciliation, or maybe, just maybe, this was the first step of a plan far darker. The first flight was uneventful, though Mason made sure to fill the silence with chatter. He rambled about wilderness photography, about fresh air, and disconnecting from the city. His phone never left his hand for long. Between bathroom trips that stretched too long and the scribbling of notes on napkins, I couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't about reconnection. It was about performance. When he asked about my Navy survival training, his eyes lit up with calculation, not curiosity. At a gas stop, I filled the tank while Mason disappeared into the convenience store. Through the window, I caught him on the phone, shoulders hunched, voice low and urgent. When he returned, I asked casually, "Everything all right?" "Just checking weather conditions," he said too quickly. "Storm system moving in." But I had checked the forecast myself before leaving Seattle. Clear skies for 3 days straight. The lie slid too easily off his tongue, practiced smooth. As we pulled away, the silence between us grew thick. I tried again, lightly. "So, what did the weather service actually say?" His grip on the door handle tightened. "Possible flurries, nothing major." The deflection only confirmed what I already knew. He wasn't worried about the weather. He was worried about me catching on. By the time we reached Denali's entrance, darkness was closing in. Wooden signs marked the boundaries, cabins scattered under towering spruce. The visitor center glowed warmly in the cold, bustling with early-season adventurers. March wasn't peak time. Most who came now were serious outdoorsmen or locals. We checked into the Denali Lodge Motel, exactly like the brochure Mason had shown me. Rustic logs, rooms with names like Grizzly Den and Caribou Creek. The clerk, a young woman with calloused hands, smiled as she processed our registration. "First time to Denali?" she asked. "For him," I said, nodding toward Mason. "I've been here before, military exercises." "What trails are you considering?" Before I could answer, Mason stepped forward. "Tlanica River backcountry route. We want the full wilderness experience." The clerk's smile faded, concern replacing it. "That's advanced terrain, very remote. Most people start with the shorter nature trails." "We're experienced," Mason insisted, his tone sharp. Her eyes lingered on him, doubtful. "Be careful. Rangers say grizzlies have been..." Through the rearview mirror, I watched the ranger station fade behind us, swallowed by forest. Civilization disappeared with it, and the road ahead twisted into darkness. The trees closed in on either side, branches scraping our windows like skeletal fingers. Mason's smile never reached his eyes. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't going camping with my son. I was driving straight into a trap. By mile 23, the paved road gave way to gravel, then finally to nothing more than a pair of weathered wooden posts marking the end of the drivable trail. The forest pressed close on all sides, shadows thickening as the afternoon light bled away. The air carried the sharp bite of melting snow, clean but unforgiving. I parked the 4Runner beside the posts and stepped out, stretching stiff legs. My GPS showed our position, 29 miles from the ranger station. The last lifeline to civilization had already vanished behind us. "Here we are," Mason said, slamming his door with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He hauled his pack from the back, the straps bulging with supplies. I lifted my own pack, the weight balanced across my shoulders with practiced ease. Decades of Navy training taught me to distribute weight, to make every ounce count. But Mason struggled. His pack was awkward, overstuffed, and I caught Esther wincing again when the strap pressed against his right shoulder. "Jesus, this thing weighs a ton," he complained, shifting it clumsily. "Proper packing takes practice." I adjusted the straps for him, noticing again how he flinched. "You hurt yourself?" "Old injury," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. Nothing serious. We started down the trail. A narrow vein cut through dense spruce. The ground was uneven, moss covering fallen logs, streams cutting across our path. Signs of life appeared quickly, massive moose tracks stamped into soft earth, claw marks raked in. To bark, scat that looked fresh. Overhead, an eagle cried. Somewhere farther off, a wolf pack howled. Mason froze at the sound, his face paling. "Did you hear that?" 5 miles away at least, I said calmly, though my eyes stayed sharp. "Keep moving." For someone who had insisted on the most remote route, Mason looked unsettled by every sound, every sign of wildlife. His insistence on danger contrasted with his fear of it. After 3 hours, we reached a clearing by a rushing creek. Flat ground, fresh water, clear sightlines. It was perfect for camp. "This is good for tonight," I said, already scanning escape routes and defensive positions. "How much farther do we go?" he asked, breathing hard. "We push deeper tomorrow. Tonight, we set up." As I hung our food cache 12 feet high and arranged supplies, Mason fumbled with the tent, lines tangled like surrender flags in his hands. "Dad, can you help?" he asked, his tone softer for the first time in days. I knelt beside him, showing him the knots, guiding his hands like I had when he was 10. For a fleeting moment, it almost felt like the old days. Almost, but the unease never left. Why demand wilderness isolation when he couldn't handle basic gear? That night, the campfire crackled, casting long shadows across our clearing. I cooked a simple meal while Mason stared into the flames, quiet and unreadable. The temperature dropped steadily, March in Alaska demanding respect. "Remember when we used to do this?" I asked, hoping to bridge the silence. "You were maybe 10. You insisted on roasting marshmallows until they caught fire." His lips twitched. "Mom was still alive then. She loved camping, said it brought out the best in people." The sadness in his tone caught me off guard. For a moment, I almost believed he meant it. But then he turned, eyes sharp. "Tell me about your childhood, Dad, before the military. What was it like being poor?" The question surprised me. Mason rarely showed interest in my past. Still, I told him about working farms in Montana, about summers spent earning every dollar, about how hardship carved resilience. "Sounds hard," he said flatly, his voice unreadable. Then, with a hint of bitterness, "Lucky for me, right? Getting to skip all that character building." The conversation dissolved into silence. Later, as I banked to the fire, he offered, "I'll take first watch. Not really tired." "You sure? Long day tomorrow?" "Yeah. I want to listen to the forest." I crawled into my tent, uneasy. Mason had never been one for quiet reflection. Through the nylon walls, I heard him moving around, feeding the fire. Normal sounds. But soon the movement stopped. Too still, like someone waiting, not watching. At dawn, the metallic clank of gear woke me. I unzipped the tent to find Mason by the truck, methodically packing every piece of equipment, rifle, GPS, food, emergency supplies, all disappearing into the vehicle. "What's going on?" My voice cut the stillness. He startled, then straightened, posture defiant. "Getting ready to leave. We planned 3 more days. What's the rush?" "Change of plans?" He avoided my eyes, loading the last container. "Weather's turning bad." The lie hung heavy in the cold air. The forecast was clear. The sky was pristine. My instinct screamed, louder than ever. "Mason," I said slowly, "talk to me. What's really happening?" Something snapped. His mask shattered. Years of resentment spilled out like venom. "You want to know? I'm done. Done with your control, your manipulation, your judgment." I froze, my chest tightening. "Son, don't!" He spun, fists clenched, eyes blazing. "Don't call me that. Sons don't beg for every dollar while their father sits on millions. Sons don't get treated like employees. You made me weak, dependent, and now I'm taking control." Words sliced deeper than any knife. I saw it then. This wasn't anger. This was premeditated hatred. "You're planning to leave me here." My voice came out low, cold. He smiled thinly. "Very good. 30 miles of wilderness ought to teach you what real dependence feels like." My throat burned. "Mason, this is bear country. Without gear, without GPS, you're sentencing me to death. Maybe you'll survive. Maybe you won't. Either way, I inherit what you kept from me. Please," I whispered, my voice raw. We can fix this. For a heartbeat, doubt flickered across his features. Then it hardened. He slammed the tailgate shut. Goodbye, Dad. Try not to meet the Grizzlies too quickly. He climbed into the truck, the engine roaring to life. I stepped forward desperately, but the tires spun, gravel spraying as he reversed and drove off. Through the windshield, his face was cold, calculated, final. Mason! My shout echoed across the wilderness, but the sound died in the trees. The truck vanished around a bend. The silence that followed was absolute. I was alone, 30 miles from the nearest human being. No food, no water, no equipment, only betrayal and the wilderness. The dust from Mason's truck still hung in the air when instinct took over. Shock was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not 30 miles from civilization, not in bear country. I forced my breathing to steady, let the old disciplines settle into place like armor. Survival wasn't about panic. It was about process. First rule, assess resources. I patted down my pockets, wallet, house keys. A folding knife I had almost forgotten was there. No food, no water, no GPS, no beacon. Just the clothes on my back and the weight of betrayal in my chest. Second rule, evaluate environment. March in Alaska meant freezing nights, spruce forests, thick undergrowth, unpredictable weather. Ranger Walsh's voice echoed in my head. Recent grizz, lie activity, wolf packs, moose on the move. Every shadow looked like a predator waiting. Third rule, set priorities. Shelter, water, signaling, navigation. I scanned the terrain. East meant deeper wilderness. West would eventually take me toward the main road, though the distance was unknown. My gut told me rivers would be my best guide. Water sources always led somewhere. I started walking, following the faint tire tracks Mason had left. But within 100 yards, the ground shifted, the trail breaking off into what looked like an animal path. Game trails often led to water. I chose it. The forest closed in, massive spruce swallowing the light. It felt like walking through a tunnel of green and shadow. I snapped branches as I went, crude markers in case rescue ever came this way. Still, I knew the odds. Nobody would stumble across me unless I made myself visible. Signs of wildlife appeared everywhere. Claw marks carved into bark, prints the size of dinner plates pressed into damp soil, scat still steaming in the cold. I made noise as I walked, clapping my hands, humming, letting any bear know I wasn't prey to be ambushed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mason had dumped me here to be killed by the wilderness, yet the wilderness felt more honest than my own blood. Hours passed. My mouth grew dry, tongue heavy. My legs ached, every joint reminding me I wasn't 25 anymore. Still, I pushed forward. Stopping meant surrender. Then came the sound, faint at first, rhythmic, mechanical, not animal. Engines. I froze, straining to listen. Multiple engines, slow, methodical, not a distant highway, too close, too distinct. ATVs, maybe. Hunters, rangers, whoever they were human. Hope surged through me, raw and dangerous. I turned north, forcing my way through undergrowth that clawed at my clothes. Branches whipped my face. My knees screamed protest, but I kept moving. The sounds grew louder, real. The trees thinned, sunlight breaking through, and then I saw them. A clearing, 4 ATV riders, helmets off, eating lunch from packed coolers. They looked up in shock as I stumbled out of the forest, scratched, dirty, breathless. The man in front killed his engine and strode toward me, concern etched on his weathered face. He looked like someone born to the wild, beard streaked with gray, eyes sharp, body strong from years outdoors. "Sir, what happened? Why are you out here alone?" I swallowed hard, my voice hoarse from dehydration. "My son? He left me, took everything, drove away. I have nothing." The man's expression shifted from concern to disbelief, then to anger. "He abandoned you? Out here?" He shook his head. "That's attempted murder." "I'm William Harper," I said, my voice steadier now that the words had form. "My son Mason brought me camping, then he left me with nothing." "Jesus." The man pulled off his helmet, eyes narrowing. "I'm Oliver Reed. Used to be a ranger here. These are my friends." He gestured to the others, who stared at me in quiet horror. A woman in her 30s pressed a water bottle into my hand. I drained it in one long pull, life rushing back into my veins. "How long ago?" Oliver asked, his tone sharp, professional. 4 hours, maybe less. He exchanged glances with the others, then pulled out his GPS. If your son took the main road out, he's got a 6-hour drive minimum to Anchorage. But there's a ranger trail, shortcut. We can get you back to the lodge in 90 minutes. The implication hit me like lightning. I could get back before Mason, before he realized I wasn't dead. You mean I could be there when he returns? Oliver studied me, his eyes weighing my resolve. Easily. But the question is, do you want to call the police now or later? Something hardened inside me. Mason had calculated every detail, plotted my death down to the hour. But he had made one fatal mistake, underestimating the wilderness community and underestimating me. I want to get back to the motel first, I said quietly. Then I'll decide. Oliver nodded, understanding passing between us. Climb on. Your son won't see this coming. The ride was brutal. Creek crossings, steep inclines, fallen trees. But Oliver navigated like a man who knew every inch of the land. My body ached with each jolt, but I clung to the thought of what awaited Mason. The son who had planned his father's death would find instead a reckoning. When the lodge finally appeared, rustic logs against the backdrop of towering peaks, my chest tightened with relief. Civilization, shelter, a battlefield of a different kind. Mason's truck was nowhere in sight, not yet. Oliver dismounted, meeting my eyes. You've got time. Whatever you're planning, make it count. I nodded, pulling the folded documents from my jacket. They felt heavier than ever, not just paper, but destiny. Mason thought he had buried me in the wild. But when he walked into that motel tonight, he'd find something else waiting. Not a corpse, but a father ready to fight back. Back in the motel room, the walls felt closer than the forest ever had. The wilderness was honest in its danger. Teeth and claws, storms and cold. But here, I was about to face something far more insidious. My own blood, the boy I had raised, walking willingly into a trap of his own design. I sat on the edge of the bed, the folded legal documents spread across the desk. They looked ordinary. Ink on paper, just another set of contracts in a life full of business decisions. But they were anything but ordinary. 3 weeks earlier, after that bitter confrontation in my living room, I had made a choice in a moment of despair. I changed my will. At the time, I told myself it was just a precaution. Now, it felt like prophecy. Mason would inherit nothing. Not the shops, not the accounts, not the house his mother loved. Everything. Every cent, every tool, every brick would go to wildlife conservation, veterans charities, us, and a scholarship fund in Sarah's name. The irony was almost poetic. In trying to kill me for money, he had guaranteed that every dollar he coveted would go to strangers instead. But paper alone wasn't enough. Mason was clever, manipulative. If it came down to his word against mine, he would spin his lies with practiced ease. I needed more than documents. I needed evidence, witnesses, proof that even a jury couldn't ignore. I pulled out Oliver's card, the one he had handed me in the clearing. I dialed. He answered on the first ring. "William, settled in?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm, "but I need your help." "What kind of help?" "When Mason comes back, I want everything documented. His words, his reaction, every detail. You planning to confront him before calling the police?" "I'm planning to give him exactly what he thinks he wants, a chance at inheritance. And then I'll show him the truth. I want him to incriminate himself in his own words." Silence hummed on the line. Then Oliver spoke, low and steady. "That's strategic. You want me as a witness? If you're willing, and bring that digital camera you had on the trail. Mason's going to say things that need to be preserved for a jury. I'll be there by 8:30. When I hung up, I called my attorney in Seattle. The conversation was short but vital. The new will would be filed the next morning, stamped into permanence no matter what happened tonight. Mason's inheritance, his motive for betrayal, was evaporating by the hour. Next, I walked down to the front desk and requested an adjoining room. The clerk, an elderly woman with eyes that had probably seen decades of Alaskan drama, didn't ask questions, just slid me the key with a nod. By evening, the room was staged. The desk arranged with the legal papers spread out like bait. The chair angled so Mason would see them the second he walked in. My phone set with 911 on speed dial. Oliver stationed next door with recording equipment ready. I checked the setup like I would have checked gear before a mission, methodically, no detail overlooked. Military training had taught me that preparation eliminates variables, and tonight there could be no variables. At 8:15, a soft knock sounded. Oliver slipped inside, carrying his camera gear. His face was grim, professional, the look of someone who had seen too many wilderness tragedies. He positioned the camera with quiet efficiency, testing the angles, ensuring the microphone captured every corner of the room. "Everything's ready," he said, adjusting the tripod. "When he arrives, you'll have audio and video. What happens legally after we turn this over to the police? Attempted murder, reckless endangerment, inheritance fraud. He's looking at years, maybe decades." I nodded, a cold calm settling into my chest. "Good." Then we waited. Outside, night pressed down on the lodge, stars flickering between clouds. Through the window, I could see the empty parking lot, its silence broken only by the occasional crunch of boots from other guests. My pulse beat steady, measured, as though my body had remembered combat rhythm. By 8:45, the tension was a living thing in the room. I sat in the chair, the legal papers before me, my posture straight, hands still. Every second that ticked by carried me closer to the inevitable. And then, headlights, sweeping across the lot. The distinctive rumble of the rental truck's engine. Mason had returned. I heard Oliver shift in the adjoining room, the quiet scrape of equipment adjusting. I didn't move. I didn't blink. This was it. The boy who had left me to die in the wilderness was about to walk through the door and find his perfect crime already collapsing around him. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to Mason. I was ready for him. The door handle rattled once, twice, before the key finally slid home. I heard the scrape of me, towel, the hesitant click of the lock, and then the door creaked open. Mason stepped inside cautiously, his body half-turned as though he expected to find silence, emptiness, maybe even a note left behind. But not me. The overhead light illuminated his face, and I watched the recognition strike like a blow. His features twisted, confusion first, then shock, and finally something approaching fear. "Dad?" The word came strangled, disbelieving. How are you here? How did you get back?" I didn't rise from the chair. I sat steady, the legal documents spread across the desk between us like evidence on a courtroom table. "Turns out," I said calmly, "I'm harder to kill than you calculated." His legs seemed to falter, and he grabbed the doorframe for support. His eyes darted around the room, searching for answers, for an escape route that didn't exist. "This doesn't make sense," he stammered. "I left you 30 miles out. No food, no gear. You shouldn't be alive," I finished for him, my tone even. "Yes, I remember. 30 miles from nowhere, without supplies, with nothing but your parting words. Go meet the Grizzlies. A fitting farewell, I suppose." His mouth opened, then closed again, sweat breaking out across his forehead despite the cool air. "Dad, wait. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, rising slowly to my feet. "You brought me here to murder me. You spent weeks, maybe months, planning it. The tickets, the sudden enthusiasm for camping, the lies about weather, even practicing your shock sun routine for when the Rangers found my body." He shook his head violently, hands raised as though trying to block the words. No, you've got it wrong." I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. "Do you want to know what your biggest mistake was? It wasn't leaving me in the wild. It was underestimating the people who live here. Turns out, unlike you, hey, don't abandon strangers to die. They help them survive." He froze, realization dawning that others knew, that his crime had witnesses. "If this is about money," he started. "It was always about money for you," I cut in, my tone like steel. "Every conversation, every demand, every ounce of affection you pretended to give, it all came with dollar signs attached." I reached for the papers on the desk, lifting them deliberately. "You want to know what's fascinating, Mason? 3 weeks ago, after our fight at home, I changed my will. Called it a moment of paternal disappointment at the time, but now?" I laid the pages flat where he could see them. "Now it looks like foresight." His eyes locked on the bold print, and the blood drained from his face. "What do you mean, changed?" "I mean you inherit nothing. Not the shops, not the accounts, not the house. Everything goes to charity, to conservation, to a scholarship fund in your mother's name." "You can't do that." His voice rose, cracking with desperation. "I'm your son." You were my son, I said quietly. This morning, you became something else entirely, a man willing to trade his father's life for a balance sheet. He stumbled forward, hands outstretched. Dad, please just listen. We can fix this. You don't know what it's been like, living under your thumb. You kept me dependent, judged every move I made. You made me this way. And there it was. The dam burst. The venom poured out. You self-righteous bastard, he spat. You think you're so noble, but every dollar you gave me came with strings. Every allowance, every gift. It was just control. You think you raised me? No. You built me like one of your cars, piece by piece, until I couldn't function without you. And now you want to blame me for trying to cut the cord? His chest heaved, his voice cracking with rage. I felt something strange then. Not anger, not grief, a clarity I hadn't known in years. You're right, I said even. Lee, I enabled you. I confused providing with parenting. I thought money could replace discipline, and I failed you as a father because of it. But I didn't create your willingness to commit murder, Mason. That choice was yours alone. His eyes went wide, panic clawing through the bravado. Then change it back. Fix the will. We can forget all this. The will was filed this afternoon, I said. It's done. He sagged into the chair I had vacated, his body suddenly smaller, diminished. His eyes darted to the papers again, then to me, then back, as though sheer force of will could undo ink already dry. Where are you going? He asked, his voice cracking as I moved toward the door. To call the police. No! His voice broke, raw and terrified. Dad, wait, please. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the boy I had raised, the man he had become, and the stranger I no longer recognized. Goodbye, Mason, I said quietly. In a strange way, you've given me exactly what I needed. Absolute clarity about who you really are. The last thing I saw before stepping outside was his face collapsing into despair, staring at the legal documents that represented the death of everything he had plotted for. Through the wall, I knew Oliver's cameras had caught it all. His confession, his rage, his desperation, proof no jury could ignore. And for the first time since Sarah died, I felt something that had eluded me for decades. Peace. The fluorescent lights in the Anchorage Police Department interview room buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the metal table between us. Spread across its surface lay the evidence. Oliver's digital recordings, my written statement, the copy of my newly amended will, each piece stacked alike bricks in a wall that Mason could never climb. Detective Sarah Martinez, a woman with sharp eyes and the steady calm of someone who had seen every kind of wilderness. S's tragedy clicked through the audio files on her laptop. Mason's voice filled the room, loud and undeniable, his own words dripping with venom, confessing to every detail of the plan. Mr. Harper, she said, glancing up at me, I've been handling wilderness crimes for 8 years. This is the most premeditated case of attempted murder I've encountered. Your son didn't just lose his temper. He designed this step by step. The DA will move forward with first-degree charges. Her tone was clinical, but her eyes softened slightly, as though she understood the weight pressing down on me. Through the window in the door, I could see Mason in handcuffs being processed at the booking desk. The fluorescent light made him look smaller, paler, the confidence stripped away. For the first time in years, he wasn't demanding. He wasn't manipulating. He was just a man facing the consequences of his choices. Oliver sat beside me, arms folded across his chest, the steady presence of someone who had seen danger before and knew how to stand firm. He had driven down from Denali to deliver his witness statement personally. Without him, I might have been bones in the forest. What's the likely sentence? I asked, my voice quiet, steady. 15 to 25 years, Martinez replied. Attempted murder in the first degree, reckless endangerment, conspiracy tied to inheritance. Alaska law takes wilderness abandonment seriously. It's a death sentence by other means, and the courts treat it that way. I nodded slowly, though the words didn't bring the satisfaction I thought they might. Watching my son through that window, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. Just emptiness. This wasn't victory, it was inevitability. The natural endpoint of years of resentment and entitlement that I had foolishly fed. Will you be returning to Seattle right away? Martinez asked gently. Tomorrow, I said. First, I need to finalize some estate paperwork with my attorney here. Make sure everything's secured. She nodded knowingly. making sure your new will can't be contested. Yes, among other things. When I stood to leave, gathering the evidence folders, Oliver followed me out. The morning air was crisp, the Chugach Mountains rising beyond the city skyline, like a silent reminder of where this had all begun. Traffic moved slowly, practical, steady, so different from the storm still raging inside me. "What happens now?" Oliver asked quietly as we walked toward his truck. "I go back to my shops, back to Seattle, back to figuring out what kind of man I want to be with whatever years I have left." I looked toward the mountains, their snowcaps sharp against the sky. Turns out surviving your own child's murder attempt gives you remarkable clarity about priorities. He hesitated, then asked the question I hadn't considered. "You planning to visit him during the trial?" I stopped walking, the weight of it hitting me square. The paternal instinct to protect, to forgive, warred against the hard truth of what Mason had tried to do. I let the silence stretch before answering. "No," I said finally. "The boy I raised died in those woods the morning he left me. Whatever's left isn't my son anymore." Oliver nodded solemnly, not arguing, not offering platitudes. He just handed me his card again, pressing it into my palm. "If you ever want to come back to Alaska for the right reasons, fishing, camping, to actually enjoy the wilderness, call me. First trip's on me." I frowned, taken aback. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged. "Because you survived something that should have killed you, and instead of letting it make you bitter, you're turning it into purpose. That's worth supporting." I gripped his hand firmly, genuine gratitude swelling in my chest. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me," he said. "Thank the wilderness community. We look out for each other here." As his truck pulled away, I stood alone on the curb, the city alive around me. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed my attorney. There were foundations to establish, scholarships to fund, and a lifetime of enabling to undo. Mason had brought me to Alaska to die for money. Instead, I would live for purpose. 3 days later, back in Seattle, an envelope arrived at my office. Mason's handwriting scrawled across the front. 5 pages inside, his words flowed with practiced manipulation, disguised as apology. Promises of change, pleas for forgiveness, explanations of how prison would ruin his life, of how I could still save him if I reconsidered the inheritance. I read it once, then fed it into the shredder. Some relationships don't survive attempted murder, no matter how much money you've poured into them. As the machine hummed, shredding the last physical piece of Mason's grip on my life, I felt something I hadn't known since Sarah was alive: freedom. The weeks that followed felt like stepping out of a storm into sudden, startling silence. For the first time in decades, I wasn't chasing Mason's demands or patching over his failures with money. I wasn't apologizing for choices I hadn't made or trying to buy forgiveness that never really existed. Instead, I was building something new. The scholarship in Sarah's name became real, funded, documented, permanent. Veterans organizations received the first checks. Wildlife conservation groups sent back letters of gratitude, their words reminding me that money, when given with purpose, could heal instead of corrupt. Mason's trial loomed, and the papers reported the case with the clinical detachment of legal process: attempted murder, wilderness abandonment, inheritance fraud. But I didn't read them more than once. I didn't need to. The verdict of my own heart had already been delivered in that motel room when I saw the TR, Youth in his geeked eyes. And yet, through all of it, I found clarity I never thought possible. Love is not measured in dollars. Parenting isn't proven in gifts. Sacrifice doesn't count when it breeds dependence. For 20 years, I confused provision with care. I thought if I gave Mason everything, I was honoring Sarah's memory. But love without discipline isn't love at all. It's negligence dressed as kindness. I can't undo what happened. I can't bring back the boy I thought Mason was. But I can choose what happens next. And what happens next is purpose. A life lived not for one entitled man, but for many who deserve a chance. If you followed this story to the end, maybe you see the lesson too. Money can't fix everything. In fact, sometimes it breaks more than it mends. Real love, real care, it comes with boundaries, with guidance, with truth even when it hurts. Mason tried to destroy me for wealth. Instead, he freed me to live differently. And that's why I'm sharing this with you. Because maybe someone out there is making the same mistake I did. Maybe you think giving endlessly is the same as loving. It isn't. So, if this story resonated with you, if you believe that love means more than money, that survival isn't just about the wilderness, but about the choices we make, then I ask you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, what would you have done if it were your child? Because sometimes the hardest wilderness we face isn't in the forest, it's in our own family.